Greetings, system failure listeners. Nate here and Brian there on the other side of the Atlantic. Brian, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Yeah, we're recording this over Discord because you are in Serbia, if I have my country correct.
You have your country exactly correct, Brian. Yep, I'm talking to you from my good buddy's house here in the mountains of southern Serbia. Been a great trip so far. It's been nice to get away from my regular job, even though, of course, we can't let system failure essays and podcasts go unpublished. So that's what brings us to this Discord call today.
So is
How
this
you doing, Brian? How's your week shaping?
sorry, is this Vladimir's new house you're in?
That sure is, yeah. Vlad's house. They moved in about 2 years ago, and they have a new little baby, and so we've been hanging out with them. Last time I hung out with them, it was a lot of going out to museums and cafes and nightclubs. But this time we're just grilling food and hanging out and chit chatting.
Nice. Has anyone offered you any goat testicles yet?
No, we haven't had it. I have had some pig kidneys, but that's as exotic as it has gotten.
All right. Cool. Well, what else is going on?
It's really great coming out to Serbia. It's fun. It's like the thing that's great about traveling is that like things are different and yet the same. It's interesting to see how similar like a different culture is. A lot of things are very similar, and then a few things they do differently, and it seems exotic and fun. I don't know. It's kind of like it's a good shakeup. It makes you. It's refreshing to. It's like you're tearing down your cultural interface to the studs and kind of have to build it up from scratch. Trace and I, we don't speak the language here, Serbian, and so we're a little bit, we're kind of a little bit like kids, children. We need help to like find out where the bathroom is, So anyway, I kind of like that. It's good. It's instructive. You tear your personality down a little bit, and then, like I say, build it back up.
Are you being like was your Uber ride like a car being pulled by a donkey?
That sounds like Borat. And the funny thing is, like when the first time we came to Serbia was 2013, and I told myself that in my mind's eye, I was kind of picturing having never been to Eastern Europe before 2023. In my mind's eye, I was kind of picturing the Borat village from that 2005 movie, and I was like, I'm sure it will not be like that because then I'm sure that this is just an ignorant conception on my part. But then it was funny. Their village, their town here. The city of Raška, Serbia, it does kind of look like Borat's village in the sense that the houses have the red terracotta roofs, and I don't know, it does have somewhat of that vibe, which is hilarious. But we love hanging out here. I'll tell you one thing that's interesting about, and this may be because hard times bring people together, but one thing about Serbia is they don't have any homeless people at all. There's like not one. It's really shocking coming from the United States to come here to a city that's maybe Ryan, it's about 2/3 the size of our fair home city of Portland, and there's like not a single homeless person. That they just would never let that happen. They're really like a warm, tight knit community, which is just that sense of community is something that seems to be notably lacking from our societal experience stateside. I'm sure you'd agree, Brian.
Well, I've said it before, but we're basically like the drone population on the Death Star, whose job it is to like work in the pits to kind of keep the whole operation running, so they can go around and destroying Yavin 4 and whatnot.
Look, when you say drone, you mean clone?
Well, just like like drones, like bees in a hive or something, or the
Oh, I see.
the workers.
You mean drone is literally a worker who is just like a mindless worker. I thought you were meaning like drone as in like one of these autonomous drones that flies around and terrifies the good citizens of New Jersey.
Sure.
Yeah, man. I gotta say, you gotta come out here sometime. You would love it. It's like it looks like a fairy tale. Vlad lives out here in the mountains of southern Serbia. You fly into Belgrade, which is the north of Serbia, and drive south. It gets more mountainous, and you pass like 13th century fortresses and monasteries, and they have these tall, pine trees that have like a magical look about them. And I would say it's all very. It seems enchanting to. It looks like a fairy tale to someone coming from, the United States. It's pretty awesome.
Well, how do you feel about being like several thousand miles closer to the bombing campaign that's going on in Iran right now?
Yeah, man. So in the hours before this podcast started, the war drums are beating at the heart of the decaying empire. I will say, there was a moment when Trace saw a headline saying that flights were canceled on the East Coast, and we were like, is this like a war thing? But then it was like, oh, that was because of the storm last week. And indeed, when Trace and I went to fly out of Boston, this past week. There was a massive, like the biggest blizzard in like 10 years that blew through New York and Boston. And we had to have our flights delayed by a day. And there was all kinds of cancellations and a kerfuffle as we tried to figure out how we're going to get here. But we eventually did, and so there was like a leftover notification that came up on Tracy's phone or headline that a bunch of flights were being canceled on the East Coast, and she was like, "Is this because of military action?" We had a moment of being, "Wow, we're far away from home during a time of war." So, yeah, man, I don't know. What do you think? I was afraid it would happen. It seemed like it was going to happen, and yet here we go again. The 12-day war turned out to not be 12 days at all. How thoroughly depressing. What are your thoughts, Brian?
What are my thoughts? I think that the Donald must have realized that he's gonna get shellacked in the midterms, and that this is basically it. So he's, abandoning the being a populist president, and now it's just full on, reptilian overlord agenda.
I was thinking along similar lines, but I'm wondering if maybe he thinks that if this war goes well enough and the regime change seems to go relatively painlessly relative to our horrific misadventures in Syria, Libya, and Iraq and Afghanistan, if this one somehow goes better, maybe it will burnish his image enough to forestall a disaster in the polls, this November. But man, I can't. That seems like a terrible political calculation. I think that everyone is sick of endless wars. This was one of the main reasons that Donald got elected in 2016 because he could say to Hillary Clinton, "Well, that your husband, took us into pointless wars." I don't know. Does the Clinton administration have pointless wars on its record? Ironically, it has the 1999, NATO action against Serbia, where they bombed the good people of the city of Belgrade. But maybe I'm mixing this up with, George Bush. When Jeb Bush is running against the Donald in the primaries, he can look at Jeb Bush and say, "Your brother lied us into multiple wars. This is why I'm the better candidate to represent the Republican Party in the 2016 election." And it was wildly effective, and everyone hated Hillary Clinton because her paws were all over the disastrous Libya affair, as you may recall, Brian. And so I got to think that there's no way that another war is going to mollify the Donald's anti-war base. So maybe your analysis is the best one. Maybe he's just doesn't have to get reelected and doesn't care.
Well, there's all the tweets are on Twitter of like the Donald, back in 2016 or at least towards the end of Obama's presidency, saying that Obama's going to go to war with Iran because he's a bad negotiator and is ailing in the polls and whatnot. And so it's really come full circle.
Yeah, that's like rather than draining the swamp, the Donald's just going to become the swamp. It defies credulity at this point. I really hope we can just get through this with a minimum of bloodshed, but I don't know, man. I have the feeling, and maybe it's overdramatic of me, but I have the feeling of this man just being in the Balkans makes me think of the beginning of World War One. And we have this man, the story of Gavrilo Princip, this man who shot the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, and that was the first domino in a whole row of dominoes that ended in the worst disaster of all time, in World War One, the thing that J.R.R. Tolkien based Mordor on. I just have a feeling like this is the first domino of a whole row of deeply disturbing dominoes. Sincerely hope I'm wrong about that. But do you feel a sense of foreboding, Brian? Do you feel the clouds darkening on the horizon?
Yeah, well, the Donald was doing his State of the Union address the other day, and I guess he did some funny things, like, he kept on calling the Democrats sickos, and I don't know, like, it was like the normal Donald Trump thing, but I just, I was just, it just left a bad taste in my mouth, just because it seemed like obvious we'd be going to a war with Iran soon, and, here we are. And, Iran is a big country with a lot of resources, and this isn't going to be, it's not going to be like Venezuela. It's hard to imagine how this ends well. Well, I mean, we talk about it here on the System Failure podcast, but, in order to keep the economy going, they have to do something to prop it up, and that comes at the expense of the well-being of every normal person. And, I don't know. Yeah, it's not a good feeling. I'm not happy about it.
Well, when it comes to speculating about the unhappy feelings you're talking about here, Brian. Yeah, you and I both managed to get through, a good chunk of Mr. Tucker Carlson's recent re-interview of the venerable Catherine Austin Fitts. And we made a big deal about her first appearance on Tucker, Brian. She really captured our imagination some 10 months ago or something like that, whenever she was last on. And for those who don't remember, Catherine Austin Fitts, of course, was the Assistant Secretary of the Housing and Urban Development under George H.W. Bush in the early 90s, but she became a whistleblower and got in all kinds of trouble, legal trouble, got her banks cancel all of her bank accounts because she was blowing the whistle on money, but being clandestinely removed from the financial system. And the thesis that she laid out last time was this idea that the elites are trying to, the elites are aware that there's a countdown clock to doom built into the capitalist system, right? From a Marxist perspective, you might say that the proliferation of technology means that private ownership of the means of production is doomed, right? Because you're going to make it so that employees are not necessary at all or only barely necessary, and then so a system of employees and employers, it can't last when you don't need employees anymore. We're going to need new production roles and a new scheme for organizing production. Well, according to Cash Austin Fitts, the elites have some inkling of the countdown clock to destruction, and so they're preparing a new system to catch or receive the population, the public, you and me, whenever things finally go belly up here. And so she was on Tucker this time and talking about how that situation has progressed considerably, even in the last 10 months. And Brian, do you remember her talking about the Nest cameras? Not Nest, Flock cameras, excuse me, not Nest.
I do.
Yeah. So have you seen that there's like those Flock cameras are up in Maine? I think they have some down in Kennebunkport now. I mean, that's pretty. These cameras just the local governments contract with Flock to put them up, but then Flock sells the data from these cameras. They track all license plates. Everyone that drives to the fair city of Kennebunkport is going to get their license plate written down, and that information gets sold or forwarded to who knows. And Peter Thiel's Palantir, his sinisterly named Palantir, who knows? But you can see that a system of mass surveillance, right? It's obviously being rolled out here. I mean, we're obviously being surveilled more and more and more. Obviously, I had to give up my biometric information just this week in order to get on a flight to Europe, and I'll have to give it up again when they're going to take pictures of me, maybe even take my fingerprints at some point. But these days, it's a lot of pictures. So it's just like the system of mass surveillance has become more visible even in just the past 10 months with all these Flock cameras going up nationwide. And then the other piece that she emphasized in this most recent podcast was programmable currencies, like where all your transactions are electronic and visible to the authorities, and they can. And so her example was like a 15-minute city, like your debit card will only work within, it's geofenced to within 15 miles of your house or apartment. Brian, can you imagine that? Like having your transactions limited, in a way that the government could never do with cash, right? They can kind of do it with digital U.S. dollars and digital bank accounts. Fitz herself had her bank, closed down her accounts because she had fallen afoul of the ruling regime. But man, it's a scary thought to think that you could be confined to, a 15-mile circumference radius of your house or something like that.
Yep.
And then of course, and then Catherine listed for her third pillar. You've got mass surveillance, programmable currency, and local infrastructure. And the local infrastructure would be like the Flock cameras, or the ability to take your picture when you get on a flight, or the ability to shut down your debit card from a point of sale terminal, things like this, eh?
Yeah, well, Sheila's making the point that in order to advance into some breakthrough unlimited energy technology, basically what our reptilian overlords need is complete control over the population to control that kind of thing, which I think makes a lot of sense, and it's in line with apparently the coming UFO disclosure and whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah, man, that certainly does fit in. The lights in the sky, it certainly fits in here. Captain Austin Fitz, of course, was also making reference on this most recent podcast to the 9 countries, like that Wesley Clark heard we were going to invade in like 2000 or like pre 9/11. He heard that we're going to invade this list was it 7 or 9 countries? I can't remember which the number is now. It's one of those two numbers, but these are countries like Syria, Libya, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, North Korea. All the countries that are kind of a pariah of the U.S.-led global order. And Fitz's input, Fitz's take on this was like, well, I mean, like Iran's like the last country that hasn't been blown up on this list of countries that Wesley Clark talked about on that Amy Goodman Democracy Now! Program on PBS, 25 years ago now. And she pointed out that Iran and their their massive amounts of oil are really important to the BRICS system, which is the alternative payment system being created. What does BRICS stand for? Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Right?
Yeah.
These countries and a whole bunch more, like Iran, are banding together to rebel against the petrodollar, the thing where you have to pay for oil in U.S. dollars, and that's the system of global trade. In return for that privilege, the U.S. Navy will be the one to make sure that there's no piracy on the high seas and facilitate global trade. This was the basics of the financial system put in place across the border there in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, in like 1946. Eh, Brian?
Yeah. Well, Tucker had someone on. I think that's where I heard about it. But someone was saying that the BRIC system is kind of this controlled opposition, and that South Africa's inclusion on that list makes absolutely no sense. Because they are, they are like not in that order of like China and India and these other geopolitical powers at all. But
yeah, that's interesting.
In any case, though, obviously they want like control over the financial system. In any case,
yeah. If it could be that BRICS is some kind of controlled opposition. But I mean, it's certainly the case that when and if the petrodollar, is no longer a thing, when it goes away, when it stops becoming the international order, it would go something like this, right? A bunch of countries break off and rebel. I do think a big piece of this is when the U.S. Seized a whole bunch of Russian assets, mostly in the form of treasury bonds here in the United States, like hundreds of billions of dollars worth, some ridiculous amount of their wealth here in the United States. We just turned off we just seized their U.S. Treasury bonds because we can, because they were invading Ukraine. But I mean, that really makes to other countries. I mean, that really makes U.S. Treasury bonds seem like they're unsafe and not the guaranteed risk-free interest that they're billed as. So that's got to be a factor in this whole thing too. In short, it seems like the financial system that the U.S. imposes, that the U.S. controls, that the rest of the world, most of the rest of the world abides by, it is teetering and starting to break up and come apart. You can see that the post-World War II economic order is crumbling at just the same moment that the post-World War II social order is crumbling. It really seems like we're entering a period of extreme volatility as the U.S. bombs Iran. Yeah, man, it's wild times to be alive.
Yeah, well, she was making this point about how they're gonna they're trying to get like a digital currency that will destroy all your local banks, basically, and it'll be like how you order from Amazon because it's convenient and it's kind of wiped out all the local options anyway. But even though it's obviously deleterious to like our communities and general economic well-being, and I think in that Zeitgeist movie they were talking about this back in when I was watching this in college in like 2007 or 8. So it's just really like obvious what the score is, I think.
Yeah, I want to try to articulate what Fitz said about the stable coins and how exactly this would destroy the local financial institutions like your local credit unions and whatnot. And I think the key thing to understand is stable coins. Something I didn't really understand, the way that you create a digital Bitcoin, like a digital coin like Bitcoin that always exactly reflects the value of the dollar. is that every time someone buys one of these coins for $1, you then take that dollar and invest it in a combination of like short-term, really short-term, like we're talking like 30 to 60-day treasury bonds. And so that way, every time someone who's buying a stable coin for $1, if you put it in treasury bonds, you can be assured to make enough money back to always to always back up each and every stable coin with $1 of its own, no matter how much the price may fluctuate up and down. The takeaway here is that the creation of these private stable coins, JP Morgan Chase has a stable coin and Wells Fargo has a stable coin. And if these are the preferred investment vehicles, because no one wants to hold U.S. dollars because the people aren't showing up to the treasury bond. The institutional investors in the foreign countries, like Russia, they're not going to come and bid in our treasury on bond auctions because they don't think treasuries are safe to own. Maybe the Chinese agree. And if that happens, what they can do, if the institutional investors and the foreign investors pull out of the treasury bond auctions, then they can dump these stable coins on you and me, the retail suckers, right? Sell us all these stable coins, which what we're really doing is, we're really buying treasuries, right? When we give $1 to the bank, thinking we're buying a stable coin, but what the bank is doing is turning around and buying the treasuries, on our behalf, and so that way they can get suckers like you and me, as mentioned, to funnel all of our money into buying these treasury bonds once the institutional interest dries up. And of course, if that happens, the small banks aren't going to have these stable coins. Your local credit union is going to have these stable coins. And so you could just see, much like when Walmart moves to town and all the revenue that used to go to the local mom and pop hardware store and the local grocery store now is instead headed to Bentonville, Arkansas, at the Walmart headquarters. All of the capital is going to the capital is going to abandon the small hamlets and little towns like the one you and I grew up in, Brian, and go to Wall Street and other centers of finance, and that could make us all dependent on these centralized financial institutions and force us to prop up U.S. Treasury bonds, no matter even as the government prints them into oblivion.
Yeah, I mean, it's just awfully fitting that this podcast gets dropped like on Friday, and then in the wee hours of the morning, we initiate a crazy war against Iran. It all fits together.
Yep. It felt like a 1-2 punch to me too, Brian. I saw last night. I was listening to this. I really enjoyed Fitz's first podcast appearance on Tucker, and so I was really excited to listen to this one. It's a shocking podcast to listen to. This woman is so sober and credible, and the things she's saying are so wild and incomprehensible that it does make her a heady experience. Only to be exceeded the next morning. You wake up, fire up the old Wall Street Journal app, and discover that we're now bombing Iran. So it's just absolutely crazy. It makes you wonder. What if you're living in some kind of simulation? You ever had that feeling where you're like, man, the old dominoes really lined up this time?
I'd have to agree. Yep. Speaking of simulations, kind of leads to the next topic, unless we want to go on more about Iran.
No, let's talk about this next topic. We gotta, even though we're looking at the dreary reality of yet another imperial war. We had a fun moment this past weekend when the U.S. men's hockey team won gold for the first time since 1980. I mean, that was wildly enjoyable, Brian?
Well, yeah, that was great fun.
Yeah, it seemed like the Canadians were much better in dominating play, but I don't know. We watched the Bruins do that to other teams and still lose in 2019 Stanley Cup Finals. So it was nice to be on the winning side of such an.
Yeah. Well, we don't win those Olympic hockey men's gold medals too often.
Yeah. So you were trying to tie this into bizarre coincidences here. So the man who scored the game-winning goal is 25-year-old New Jersey Devils center Jack Hughes. And what's interesting about this is, I don't know if you saw the clips online circulating about this, Brian, but if you go back to the 2004 Disney movie Miracle, which is about the 1980 U.S. men's hockey team and their miraculous victory. Yeah, we have like college kids from Minneapolis and Boston, and they managed to somehow overcome a Titanic Soviet team and go on to the gold medal game. And it's one of the most famous moments in sports history with an iconic Al Michaels, Do You Believe in Miracles call. But the movie Miracle about this featured actor Kurt Russell at one point cutting the last man from the U.S. squad. It's got to suck to get cut right before the Olympic tournament starts out there in Lake Placid, New York in 1980. And so in the movie, he's crossing the name Jack Hughes off a clipboard because Jack Hughes is the name of the very last man cut from the U.S. men's Olympic team in 1980. So it's one of these bizarre patterns where, like, it's like Jack Hughes gets cut in 1980, only to have another Jack Hughes, become the hero in 2026. And the other coincidence here is that the Jack Hughes from 1980 went on to play for the Colorado Rockies, and in 1982, the Colorado Rockies became the New Jersey Devils. So they played for the same professional hockey team here in the States.
Colorado.
That's a crazy coincidence. What's that?
The Colorado Rockies were a hockey team and they became the Devils?
Yep. He played on the Colorado Rockies, and a couple years later, they moved to New Jersey and became the Devils. So, same team, same name, but one guy got cut, and the other guy is going to live forever in Olympic glory.
Well, surely this is the only example you have of an outstanding coincidence like this.
I had a couple other ones here too. So, like, another interesting one is you may have heard about this book. From 1898, Morgan Robertson writes this book about a massive ocean liner called the Titan, right? That everyone considers to be unsinkable, and of course it goes out in the North Atlantic and sets sail from the United Kingdom or maybe Ireland to the United States, just like the Titanic, which set sail from Ireland to the United States. And then, of course, it crashes into an iceberg and sinks, and there's a huge loss of life because there's not enough lifeboats. I mean, this is all 14 years before the Titanic sailed, 14 years before the keel was ever laid, 14 years before anyone had conceived of the Titanic itself. But man, you sure have to stop and go, well, it's just so crazy that someone could write a story that's so on the nose, only to have that exact event unfold. 14 years later. It's like, are we living in some kind of simulation, or is there some kind of a frequency you can tune into, that exists across time? So maybe these people were unconsciously glimpsing future events, and then those events bubbled up in their subconscious. This man, Morgan Robertson, bubbled up in his subconscious, and he goes on to write a story that that matches those events exactly. Or maybe it's just a giant coincidence, but there's like too many coincidences for it to be a coincidence that there are so many coincidences. Because here's another one. In 1889, this man, the German guy Ingersoll Lockwood, writes a book about a character named Baron Trump who receives guidance from this mysterious figure called Don. I mean, I think there was 3 books, about the adventures of Baron Trump and his relationship with this person Don, and they're like extremely wealthy. A whole bunch of it takes place in New York. The parallels, just like with the Titanic story, start to become a little eerie after a while. They start stacking up, and they start making you wonder. These books from the late 1800s, how can they be predicting the events of the? How can they seem to be predicting the events of the 21st century? Man.
Well, part of Donald Trump's mystique when he was running in 2016, and what I would have to imagine led to like the whole like QAnon movement, where they decided that the Donald was basically the return of Jesus, was that Donald Trump's uncle, I think his name is like John Trump, but is the guy who like went to and took Tesla's papers like after his death. Like he went to his laboratory and collected the documents, and so there's some idea that Donald Trump is somehow some time-traveling super presence. Of course, we know now that Donald Trump is a lizard person.
It hasn't quite panned out, but I forgot about that aspect. That's a fascinating. It's one of those juicy conspiracy theories, fun to kick around with your friends, just like the coincidences mentioned there.
Well, what Kurt Metzger is always saying is that God is like George R.R. Martin to Game of Thrones, wherein he's the one writing the story, right? And so I don't know. Maybe the story's just like written in a certain way. And
I see what you're saying. That's a great point. I never heard Kurt say that, but that's really good. Like you think you're the author of your own life, but not really. You're living out someone else's script. And like all good authors, maybe there's some patterns that you might recognize. Sometimes the author gets lazy and reuses the same plot point, maybe something like that.
Well, I mean, there's really, I suppose, only one story, right? And it's like the it's like, well, the hero has to like overcome opposition. It seems like they're all is lost until like the last moment, wherein things turn around somehow, right?
Well, that's what I'm hoping for. No, the war with Iran makes me feel extremely unoptimistic, but generally speaking, I feel extremely optimistic, even as the situation around us appears to crumble or deteriorate, or what have you. I mean, everyone I think senses we're on some kind of a downward trajectory, at least in the good old U.S. of A. And yeah, I don't know. Yeah, the idea, Brian, that you just elucidated there, that it's darkness right before the dawn, that the only story that's satisfying to the human mind is the story where the plucky rebel alliance almost loses, but then at the last second manages to pull it out and, drop a proton torpedo down the reactor shaft and blow up the Death Star just at the last possible second. I've always wondered if there's an analog here to energy conservation. You know how cheetahs just sit in a tree all day; they don't move a muscle until it's time to actually, chase down the gazelle, and then they go back to the tree and sit there because in the Serengeti it's hot, and you have to burn calories to cool down. And so those cheetahs are running on an efficiency of calories, and so there's like it's like our subconscious makes us lazy so that we don't foolishly burn calories unnecessarily, maybe, so we could be efficient stewards of calories in a situation of grim and stiff Darwinian competition. But yeah, it's dark. It's always darkest before the dawn. That's kind of, I don't know. There's something exhilarating or exciting about the feeling of chaos as the old world seems to slip into chaos. And, here's a good one for you. Someone brought this up on the Substack comments on system failure. The Greeks had two words for chaos. They had chaos and had this other word, kairos. And chaos is the bad thing, where, oh my God, everything's going to hell. Things are working, clearly our systems are working less and less and less well over time. And it's like, and that can be like really disturbing. But then there's kairos, which is the positive, opportunistic aspect of chaos. When the Holy Roman Empire is firing on all cylinders, or the Roman Empire is firing on all cylinders, or the American Empire is firing on all cylinders. Well, there's really no not much in the way of opportunity, right? The opportunities are diminished for people who are motivated or smart, or people who can see a step or two ahead in the game. A lot of those opportunities are foreclosed upon in a system that's fully it's like a climaxed ecosystem in evolutionary speak. But when things dissolve and break apart, there's a lot of it's like you wait for the opportune moment, and that opportune moment, despite it being a chaotic moment, is kairos. That's what the opportune means, an opportune moment. Yeah, so maybe that's what's going on now. It sure is interesting.
Well, it seems that it was our destiny to like we were always going to go to war with Iran, right? There was just no there. We've just been approaching this for a long time, and so I mean, obviously, it's unfortunate for the people who are going to get killed in this conflict and have already been killed in the bombs blowing up and the pain and agony involved in all that. But I mean, I suppose this has to happen, and so maybe this the story is at least progressing, and we'll get to what happens like after this plan to take over the 7 or 9 nations. We can see what comes next here.
Yeah, yeah. There's another log on this Lincoln log cabin here, and that's that. And we already kind of referenced it with the wild coincidences. But like when systems start breaking down, like reality also starts breaking down. The classic examples I like to use of the Roman Empire collapses, and that spurs on a transition from polytheist paganism to monotheistic Christianity. And when the feudal system of the Middle Ages breaks down, that spurs there's a lot of different flips in reality you could refer to. There's the discovery of perspective by Filippo Brunelleschi, the same man who designed the Duomo of Florence, is the one that realized that parallel lines appear to converge on a single point on the horizon, and this discovery revolutionized art. And it really makes you wonder what kind of a conception of reality people had prior to that discovery. And this is to say nothing of the paradigm shifts involved in the Protestant Reformation and the advent of Calvinism, or the discovery of the heliocentric nature of the solar system versus the geocentric nature of the solar system, insisted upon by the Roman Catholic Church. And I think that these two examples should lead us to conclude, or at least is strong evidence in favor of the idea that as the capitalist economic system comes to its end and the system stops working so well and starts breaking down, we can look forward to a breakdown in reality itself. I mean, ChatGPT is a big part of the AI. A large language models is a big piece of that. Like in a couple years' time, we're not going to be able to tell the difference between like a deep fake ChatGPT created video and a real one. Like you could assassinate a president, but then have the president keep having press conferences and never tell anyone. Do you know what I mean? Right? Reality really does seem to be crumbling at just the same moment that the economic system seems to be crumbling. It's just the same moment that society is breaking down. At least we can speak to that at the heart of empire in the United States, right? The post-World War II mythology where we're the good guys, Hitler and the Nazis are the bad guys, and we're the ones that come riding to the rescue when someone tries to put someone else in a concentration camp. That mythos is all but gone. We've got Nick Fuentes going around talking about how Hitler is based on the internet and getting crazy amounts of views. That's what I mean when I say the social order is breaking down. So, man, it really does seem like the pot's boiling more and more and more, almost by the day now.
Well, I mean, just speaking of conceptions breaking down, did you see this clip of Jim Carrey allegedly after like the Golden Globes or whatever this is?
So I did not see this clip, but the lovely Tracy was telling us all about it today. Maybe you could set the stage for us, Brian.
It's after some kind of awards. He's holding. I'm gonna just share my screen with you. Hang on, maybe so
okay,
you can see.
Wow, I see it in the chat. Oh my god!
If you just like watch this clip of Jim Carrey, I mean, it seems like someone doing an impersonation of Jim Carrey. Like the face just looks like completely different, and like the eye color is just a little off. I mean, it could, if Jim Carrey like got a bunch of plastic surgery, maybe. Like the thing is, like Jim Carrey's done a lot of talking about how, man, what's that movie wherein he plays the guy on the TV show?
The Truman Show.
Yeah, the Truman Show, and he's like talking about how like Jim Carrey's a character in other interviews, and I mean how to characterize it.
I've heard some of Jim's lengthy rants about how how he is a construct, how we're all constructs, and how the character Jim Carrey is a construct. And there was also a time he went on Letterman, I think it was Letterman, and he was talking about the Illuminati. And you remember he held up his two palms facing the audience and made a triangle with his two thumbs and forefingers, and then held that triangle up to his face and stuck his tongue out to try to evoke the eye of providence that sits atop the pyramid on the back of the $1 bill. He was talking about like the Illuminati controlling everything. So Jim Carrey has been a man who's been down the rabbit hole for quite some time, and Tracy's description today of this bizarre video of a Jim Carrey lookalike or someone that used to be Jim Carrey. My first thought was of that old Kanye West meltdown he had, maybe let's say 2015 or something like that, and he was talking about how everything is controlled and they kind of had to end his concert early. Wasn't that out in like San Jose or something, out in the Bay Area?
Man, I don't know if I know of that incident in particular, but all of the things of which you speak are in my thoughts about Jim Carrey that I was trying to speak of before, but you articulated well. And it's just absolutely bizarre. But well, also, I mean, I can't remember if we talked about this, but Jimmy Dore was talking about this, and it seems like the person who's supposed to be Ghislaine Maxwell there, she's got like a different nose and could like easily be a body double. There was a whole scandal wherein the person who is supposed to be Jeffrey Epstein like just has like a different shaped ear. There was a lot of talk about that on various conspiracy websites, but they put his ear next to his, and it just doesn't seem possible. Unless maybe when you die, just weird things happen to your body. maybe that's possible. But is this Jim Carrey clip like some kind of like low key disclosure of like the insane reality that we live in somehow?
Yeah, it could be. I don't know, man.
They
I want
can't.
to just mention on the heels. You go first, Brian.
So they just can't like seriously entertain the notion of like body doubles. Although they just started to like on Breaking Points, they were talking a bit about like I think Crystal said she thought there was like a 20% chance that Epstein's still alive, and I really think
Yes.
that's a triumph of naivete. Or it's just like if you understand like what this guy's role is in like just in controlling the fate of our nation, or like not just our nation, but like countries all across the world. I mean, the dude was just a broker of outstanding power, and he's not even like the actual broker. He just represents some shadowy force that we really don't understand. And so, yeah, I guess they can't seriously entertain the idea of body doubles, but it just seems like it just seems like a failure of imagination to, and a triumph of naivete to not seriously consider such possibilities in the wild world that we live in. Like when you read those Epstein emails, like you gotta think hard about what kind of reality we live in.
Yeah, yeah, that's well said, man. And Crystal was responding to an Epstein email, an email in the Epstein files, which was like confirming that after the man died in prison, if indeed he died, that what the prison straight up talked about bringing in a gurney with a fake body under the blanket and sending the fake body and the fake gurney off with a fake a fake van as a decoy to attract the news media, and then sending the real Epstein body in a different van. Once the news media was off chasing the right subject, there is like at least some element of body doubling here going on, which is just really crazy. And then you remember all the elements, all the analysis online about the possibility that Biden had a body double, and there were multiple Bidens. Again, looking at like details about the shape of the ears. Remember that stuff?
Yeah, well there seem to be some images where his like height varies like wildly, I think compared to Vladimir Putin, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, that's right. I saw that one too. Yeah, so you're like, what's going on here? Like, how fabricated is the reality we're living in? It's fabricated to a truly bone-chilling degree. Of that we can be sure. We're just left to speculate about what's real and what's fake, and whether the person we're talking to is really Jim Carrey.
Yes, sir.
I wonder, Brian. The other thing I thought of when Trace brought up this Jim Carrey thing today was I thought about Bob Lazar. I even brought it up to the group a little bit. Do you remember the thing where Bob Lazar got shown some kind of a file that said that aliens are growing us as containers for souls? Do you recall this?
Man, I don't know if I remember that specifically, but it's like an idea that I've heard bandied about many times.
Well, I remember it specifically, but I think we ought to set the Bob Lazar table just a little bit here. Folks may be unfamiliar with the saga of Mr. Lazar, but Brian, as you're going to know better than me, this man, Bob Lazar, was an engineer. I think he was out in California, and he was one of these guys who just like, has a natural aptitude for engineering. Like he outfitted his Honda, his Honda Civic with like a jet engine. Isn't that the story? And they have pictures of it. The story is that he got recruited by the government and went out to Area 51 to work there, and then he ended up blowing a whistle on the whole. What really happened was, I guess his wife had an affair or something, and he got kind of washed out of the program because he was. They thought that might make him unstable or something like that. But
the story is supposed to be that like he was getting called in all nights to go work at S4 on this crazy project, and his wife is supposed to have thinking that he was cheating on him, and so she started cheating on Bob Lazar there, and then security caught wind with it, and that I guess is part of what led to him being ousted from the program. But I think what that resulted in Bob Lazar bringing people to a vantage point in Nevada where they could see the test flights of the UFOs, and they were like recording it and stuff.
Yeah, okay, that's right, and that led him to be connected to local Las Vegas TV journalist George Knapp, whose name is similar to our own last name, Brian, Knapp versus Knopf. And from there, Bob Lazar became the stuff of legend. The government tried to disavow that he ever worked for the government, but like they scrubbed his name from some of the records, but not all. And so it's really, really hard to discount his story. On the one hand, the man seems credible and his story seems to check out. On the other hand, what he's saying is absolutely crazy. And one of the crazy things he said was he was shown a document that suggests that there's a spiritual element to this, to all the lights in the sky, and that we're being like, his job was to reverse engineer alien technology, and the aliens are here. They're growing us as some kind of a container for a soul. And the reason that the Jim Carrey thing made me think of that was because this idea suggests a certain duality, right? That there's a body distinct from the soul and a soul distinct from the body. And if that's the case, or maybe we're seeing the body of Jim Carrey with a different soul in it, or something like that. What if Jim, like, what the image you just showed me, or the short video clip? I mean, it does seem like maybe Jim Carrey's body is some kind of a weird container, or it may just be that he's getting old and weird. I don't know, man. It's so weird. That's one thing about reality breaking down. About what happens when you take an axe to the anchor chain of reality. Well, you're adrift, and you can only speculate where you're going. You have no idea.
Well,
But
yeah.
dude,
If our wild conspiratorial musings seem crazy, I would just invite our dear listeners to review the Epstein files and then all the crazy stuff about UFOs. Just obviously the mundane reality that we feels like home is just doesn't seem to be the case at all.
Yeah, man, chilling. All right, well, let's see. What else we got in the news this week? One thing that happened this week, Brian, is I was interesting that the Defense Production Act of 1950 came up twice this week. We all like to. There's much kerfuffle about the difference between communism and capitalism, but in 1950, the U.S. legislature passes this law that anything that the government deems to be crucial for national defense, it can compel private companies to produce that good or service. And so two goods or services were up for being compelled under the Defense Production Act of 1950 this week. The first is Anthropic, the LLM company that makes the Claude large language model. And I get it, I don't understand exactly what's happening here. Anthropic says they don't want their Claude AI model to be used in surveillance or violence or killing people. And they're angry that their AI was used in the Maduro raid last month. And so they're raising up they're rankling the chains in public about that. Except for this company has long been allied and worked with Palantir, Peter Thiel's creepily named company. Palantir, as everyone knows, is the crystal ball that Sauron looked through and it connected them to Sauron and Lord of the Rings. This huge surveillance dragnet. Palantir figures greatly into Catherine Austin Fitz's, 3 pillars of control grid. This mass surveillance dragnet. Claude AI does business with them all the time. Why are they just positioning for PR? Well, Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, was toying with the idea of invoking the Defense Production Act to force Claude AI to participate in foreign military misadventures. But they announced just at the end of the week on Friday afternoon, they're just going to cease contracting with Claude AI and use venerable old ChatGPT to do their dirty work. So that was an interesting story there. And the second one is absolutely crazy. Seems absolutely crazy to me, Brian. Did you hear about the glyphosate thing? Glyphosate is this chemical fertilizer that is commonly used in agricultural production, and it's there's undeniable evidence that glyphosate is really harmful if you're exposed to it in large quantities. It's an occupational hazard if you're an agricultural worker, you get exposed to the stuff. And there's also burgeoning evidence that this chemical is a endocrine disruptor, meaning that it disrupts, the production of various hormones in the human body. And these are the sorts of things that led Alex Jones to scream about, turning the frogs gay, which it messes with those amphibians' process of growing up from tadpoles and frogs, and it can switch the gender of them, I guess, in some rare instances. But what's most important is that it's a big pollution on all of us. We're all, getting a bigger and bigger toxic load every year. And glyphosate, this endocrine disruptor, is one of these major contributors to that. And it was a big target of RFK's presidential campaign and his subsequent Maha alliance with Donald in 2024 that swept the Donald to victory and prompted Trump to appoint RFK. What is he? The secretary? What is his Secretary of Health? Is that right? In Human Services, I think that's what RFK's position. He got appointed to some big shot position, but like the Trump administration used the Defense Production Act this week to compel the production of glyphosate and basically lock that into our food supply for the foreseeable future. Absolutely, and I mean, it's just an absolute slap in the face to the Maha people. So it's like this week, the Donald has kicked his anti-war supporters when they're down, and now he's also thumbing his nose at the Maha people who supported his campaign in 2024. So maybe you're right, Brian. Maybe the Donald's just embracing the heel turn here, and that's all there is to this wild story.
Yeah. Well, I mean, glyphosate is the chemical that it's the pesticide, I believe, that they spray on the plants, and that plants are genetically engineered to be resistant to. And so just obviously this herbicide is in all the foods. And I mean, if you're wondering why everyone has colonic instability and eats the Sky Rizzy, you'd have to fathom that the glyphosates play a large role in it.
Yeah. There's some good details you recalled there, Brian, that I skipped over. Well done. That's it. Man, what a shocking turn of. I just can't believe that the Donald doesn't. I thought this man was deeply concerned about his popularity. I don't understand what's happening. Maybe the heel turn is maybe your heel turn is right, as mentioned, Brian.
Well, it's crazy because RFK just went on Joe Rogan's podcast, and I only listened to a little bit of it, but I guess is proud of the work he was doing, or he certainly didn't go on there and complain about Donald Trump. He was like touting the work that he had done, but man, it seems like just like an absolute failure, and it just seems like there's like an obvious connection between the Sky Rizzy and the glyphosates, and it seems like a real tragedy. Like obviously, like Tulsi Gabbard and seemingly RFK now have been steamrolled by the Donald, and our poor populist movement is just an absolute shambles.
Maybe they got steamrolled like the Donald. Maybe the system is so big and we have no line of sight, into the structures of power that exist beyond the people we thought we elected to power. Like maybe they're all just up against a system that's completely intransigent, and maybe that's what we're seeing here. But whatever the case may be, I got to think that the public is going to be extremely dissatisfied, and then we're going to see even lower approval ratings for the Donald in opinion polls coming right up. I mean, there's just no way he's going to be able to salvage anything for the midterms of 2026 scheduled for the end of the year. Man.
Yeah, well, obviously, we have to we have to demand democracy from our politicians, and they're not just gonna give us the things that the people demand, and so
yeah.
We got to hold our politicians to account, like we try to do on this podcast. Hopefully, there is a future in people like Thomas Massey and Ro Kwanna there, and hopefully, our boy Graham Plattner will overcome here in the main Senate race coming up. It is exciting, at least on Reddit. The populist support for Graham Plattner seems overwhelming. Maybe you saw that Janet Mills tweeted out that she doesn't have any Nazi tattoos recently. And
didn't she? I saw the tweet. Didn't she say she doesn't have any tattoos at all?
That's correct. Yeah. So
that's really funny.
Hopefully, more populist politicians are coming down the pipeline, and we're really in for a wild battle between good and evil. Basically, it seems.
Well, to echo your point, Brian, I would love to think that voters would be getting so sick of a status quo that's getting progressively more ridiculous, seemingly by the day. As I said, that we can reject the two-party duopoly. I mean, that's the pipe dream for me. A rejection by the general public of a two-party duopoly. That's the medicine we need to heal our society. Maybe all of this horrifying stuff and the Epstein files and war with Iran and financial corruption. Hopefully, all this stuff, will push people towards ever closer to the rejection of said duopoly.
Well, from your mouth to God's ears, or however that expression goes.
I think that's the right. Hopefully. One thing that happened this past week, Brian, is that we may have just had the biggest labor strike, like the biggest labor movement in the history of labor over in India. They had a massive, massive strike over there. Huge swaths of the Indian population didn't go to work to demand, better hours, better wages, what have you. And the organizers of the strike projected some 300 million strikers. This is comparable to the population of the entire U.S. But that's going to be a really optimistic number, 300 million. The Modi administration came out, released a number that was comically low, and so the truth is going to be somewhere in the middle of those two numbers. But almost certainly over in India, we just experienced the biggest unified labor solidarity ever seen in the history of humankind. And it's interesting that you would never know it. There's not a word of it in the media, the legacy media of the United States. Not a peep in the Wall Street Journal, nothing. It really tells you what kind of a lens on reality you're getting from that mainstream media, like how it's like the things they don't print are what really warp and distort the message and make you think you're living in some kind of a reality that you're really not living in. You're living in some alternative reality. And then the reality we actually inhabit, or the reality we imagine ourselves to inhabit, is an artificial construct, much like the Matrix and those infamous Matrix movies from the late '90s and mid 2000s. So I was interested in that. I hopefully the Indian workforce can flex their muscles more and more and more, and swing the balance of power in their favor in the ongoing economic negotiations over wages and working hours.
Yeah, I mean, there sure are a lot of people over there. So, God bless.
Yeah. Well, just one more note here, Brian. Maybe we cut it a little bit short this week. I mean, what with the crazy time difference and the fact that I don't get to be in the room with you and have to talk over the phone, maybe we'll just do one more story here, or one more note. I did get subjected to some security on the way over to Europe. And whenever I am subjected to security theater, I love to point out the fact that the American TSA, the Transportation Security Administration, is utterly incapable of finding contraband. They ran a test. You can easily Google this. It's not hard to find. They had a bunch of the TSA red team and this crew that they're undercover. They go try to sneak contraband through the TSA metal detectors and scanners and X-ray machines and try to see if they can try to see how effective their guys are. And they had a 95% failure rate. And then a few years later, they tried to fix it and do it again, and they still had a 70% failure rate. And that's the last time I can find TSA releasing public information about their efficacy. So all the business where they're like, all right, well, take your shoes off, take your laptops out. No, don't. Are you crazy? No, only if. I love it when the rules change at the airport. You go there like one time and you have to take your shoes off. The next time you don't take your shoes off. And they just roll their eyes and say, no, don't. What are you doing? Don't take your shoes off. Are you stupid? The rules are different at every airport, and the rules at every airport change every time you come to it. So feel free to not be shocked that we don't know your latest foible and peccadillo. So anyway, I like to raise my fist in defiance of the security theater, the regime that doesn't do anything, but it's like a major jobs program or something. I don't know. I'd be much happier. Just lock the cockpit doors to avoid hijacking, and we can all get on with our day. I think that's what I would like to see.
A lot of pomp and circumstance about making sure you don't bring any nail clippers aboard.
Yeah, yes, indeed. All right. Well, listen, Brian. The system failure essay this week is about the feminine trinity, and one of the most famous paintings ever that portrays the feminine trinity is William Blake's the Night of Enthearmon's Joy from 1795. And that just made me think of a poem, one of my favorite poems of all time, from Mr. William Blake. He was this crazy, British polymath who, obviously lived in the late 1700s and early 1900s. And I wonder if I could just submit this, just read a few lines from the beginning of one of his poems, and maybe you all can appreciate the poetry or find it interesting. What do you think, Brian? Are you ready for a brief poetry recitation to close out this episode of the old System Failure podcast?
Sure.
Okay, here we go. Again, this is Mr. William Blake. What is the price of experience? Do men buy it for a song or wisdom for a dance in the street? No. It is bought with the price of all that a man hath. His house, his wife, his children. Wisdom is sold in the desolate market where none come to buy, and in the withered field where the farmer plows for bread in vain. Okay, that's it. There's more to the poem, but that thing sends, gooseflesh. It gives me goosebumps. Sends a chill down my spine. It's great stuff, man. Some of these people are absolute geniuses in history, and I just love that you can read their words and get a little window into their mind.
Nice. That was a good line about wisdom being in the marketplace where no one comes to buy.
Yeah.
I think.
Wisdom is sold in the desolate market where none come to buy. Oh man, ain't that the truth?
Nice.
Oh. All right, Brian. Well, I'll bring it on home here. Obviously, like we say every week, if you guys enjoyed this episode out there in podcast land, well, feel free to swing by systemfailure.org and pay us a little visit. There, you can read the text versions of the weekly essays written by yours truly, and you can even sign up to receive those essays every single Sunday morning right there in your email inbox. I promise I won't miss a Sunday, even when I'm on vacation in Europe. You can also, if you want to get in touch with Brian or myself, you can accomplish that feat over on the About page. And yeah, I think that's about it, Brian. Thanks for bearing with me while I'm on vacation here and managing all of the back-end technical stuff. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. You seem to be good. And we'll do it all again next week, once again, from Eastern Europe.
Alrighty. We'll talk to you later.
All right, take care, Brian. Bye-bye.